"She's not cleared for combat," the instructor scoffed. But she said nothing, just tied her hair up, revealing a black ink tattoo at the base of her neck, a symbol only a handful of soldiers in the entire U.S. Army had ever earned. By the time the Apache lifted off, the colonel had seen it, and everything changed. Before we dive in, tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from today? And what's one moment when someone totally underestimated you? The desert sun hammered the concrete tarmac of Fort Rains as a dust devil spun lazily between two long rows of parked helicopters. The roar of twin rotors echoed in the distance, and the smell of jet fuel, motor oil, and hot sand hung thick in the air. At the far edge of the flight line, near a lineup of sleek Apaches, a woman stood alone, hands gloved, face shadowed under a faded cap, clipboard in one hand, a wrench in the other. Everyone called her Wren. To most, she was just another mechanic, a civilian contractor, some assumed. Others barely noticed her. She kept her hair tied up in a loose bun under her cap, wore her uniform zipped just low enough to fight the heat, and moved through hangars and workshops like a ghost, quiet, focused, unnoticed. Her name wasn't on any duty roster for flight crews. Her file didn't include a combat badge. Her flight hours were listed as non-operational, so the lie had become convenient for those around her. She wasn't a pilot. She wasn't even cleared to sit inside the cockpit. That was the narrative anyway. Most of the junior officers at Fort Rains had no idea who she really was. They didn't ask. They assumed Wren had been assigned to the maintenance division due to admin reshuffling or some bureaucratic favor. A few had seen her working alone on a stripped-down bird well after sunset. Shirt sleeves rolled up, arms smudged with grease, fingers moving with surgical precision. They'd nod, maybe mutter a joke about wasted talent, and keep walking. But if they'd ever watched closely, really watched, they might have seen the way she moved around an Apache. Not like someone maintaining it, like someone who knew what it could do. Inside the operations building, the air was cool and sterile. Monitors blinked with flight schedules, digital maps of the surrounding training zones, and weather updates. A group of fresh flight school graduates leaned against the wall near the vending machines, laughing under their breath. "Check this out," one of them muttered, jerking his head toward the glass door as Wren entered. "That's the girl who keeps sniffing around the flight sim bay. Think she's trying to be one of us?" Another chuckled. "She's maintenance, probably just cleaning the joysticks." Wren didn't even glance in their direction. She walked past them, straight-backed, purpose-driven, and vanished down the hallway leading toward the simulation hangars. The door clicked shut behind her. Inside the sim chamber, one of the senior instructors, Major Grant, was finishing up a session with a lieutenant named Burke, a hotshot pilot from the East Coast, who hadn't failed a single combat sim in 6 months. The two were laughing as they reviewed footage of a mock strafing run. On the monitor, Burke's Apache executed a tight banking maneuver through a simulated canyon before unloading a salvo of Hydra 70s on an enemy convoy. Wren stood quietly at the edge of the room. Major Grant noticed her presence after a moment. "Can I help you?" he said, without much effort to hide his skepticism. She nodded once. "Requesting sim time." Grant raised an eyebrow. "You're not on the schedule. You're not even listed as a trainee." "I'm qualified." "That's not what your record says." She didn't respond, just waited. Calm, poised. Grant exchanged a glance with Burke. "What did you say your name was again?" "Wren." She didn't offer a last name. The instructor tilted his head. "You're not Army, are you?" "I was." He gave a sharp, dismissive exhale. "Right, and I was Elvis." Burke smirked. "Come on, sir. Give her a shot. Let's see what the janitor's got." Grant hesitated. Then, perhaps amused by the thought of humbling someone trying to punch above her weight, he keyed the console. "Fine, 2 minutes. Solo engagement scenario, canyon terrain, 5 hostile targets, no pre-brief. Let's go." Wren stepped into the pod, no hesitation. The door hissed shut behind her. A moment later, the sim chamber lit up. Burke leaned over to Grant. "What's the bet? She hits one before she crashes?" Grant shook his head. "She won't get off the ground." But then the screen lit up, and the Apache came alive. Not just airborne, but moving with fluid tactical confidence. Pitch, yaw, throttle, every command was executed with the kind of intuition that took years of combat flying to master. The simulated terrain whipped past at low altitude. 5 red markers appeared on the radar grid, representing enemy armor units in motion. Wren adjusted altitude, shifted vector, and dropped into a tight valley where radar signal loss would make her momentarily invisible. Grant's smile faded. "She's using terrain masking," he muttered. Burke frowned. "That's a Tier 1 maneuver. Where the hell did she learn that?" A missile locked and fired. Direct hit. Second, third, each with surgical precision. Within 90 seconds, all 5 hostiles were eliminated. The sim ended. The screen faded to black. For a moment, the room was silent. Then the pod door opened and Wren stepped out, expression unchanged, as if she'd just finished reviewing a checklist. Grant straightened up. "Where exactly did you train?" "I didn't," she replied, and walked past them toward the exit. Only once she'd left did Burke notice the faded black mark on the back of her neck, just beneath her tied-up hair. A tattoo, simple, stark, an insignia almost no one outside a classified joint task force would recognize. Burke's eyes widened. "Sir, that's not a civilian." Grant didn't say a word, but later that night he made a call to someone with stars on their collar, because if that mark was real, then Wren hadn't just been a pilot, she'd been part of something far more dangerous, and she'd kept it hidden for a reason. Under the burning sun of the New Mexico desert, the hum of machinery echoed through the base. Grease-stained wrenches clinked against metal as technicians bustled beneath rotor blades and fuselages. Among them was her, Liv. She didn't wear rank, she didn't speak much, and no one knew how she'd ended up working in the Army base's helicopter hangar. Most assumed she was just a civilian contractor, maybe some washed-up dropout with a knack for engines. And Liv did nothing to correct them. Her uniform was the standard issue for on-site contractors, navy blue coveralls unzipped just enough to fight off the heat, revealing a faint scar running along her collarbone, just visible under her white tank top. Her hair was tied back tight, but a few strands of blonde curled loose beneath her cap. Her eyes, green as artillery tracer rounds, scanned every bolt she tightened, every hydraulic line she reconnected. She moved like someone who had lived a lifetime around aircraft, every motion efficient, practiced, automatic. But to the soldiers walking past the hangar doors, she was just the mechanic again. "Morning, grease monkey," one pilot had joked once. She hadn't even looked up. That day started like any other, until a briefing call blared across the intercom. A scout team had gone dark on the far edge of a training zone near the mountain ridge. Reports were vague, possible communications failure, maybe worse. And with only 2 Apaches operational on base due to scheduled maintenance, the urgency turned into chaos. Colonel Harris burst into the hangar, his combat boots thundering on the concrete. His voice roared over the sound of tools. "Which Apache is closest to flight ready?" Liv wiped her hands and stepped forward. "Tail number 7 Delta's prepped. Needs a systems check and someone who can handle her weight distribution under desert heat." Harris didn't even look at her. "I asked for a bird, not your opinion. Where's your supervisor?" "He's off base for 2 days. I'm the senior tech on shift." "Well, you're not cleared for combat or flight. Just make it ready. I'll get someone who can fly it." Liv didn't answer. She turned back to the bird and started the final systems check. Hydraulics, green. Weapons sync, green. Diagnostics clear. She heard them arguing in the colonel's office. 2 warrant officers debating who had enough flight hours. One had passed out during heat acclimatization last week. The other hadn't flown an Apache outside of simulators in 6 months. Liv sighed. She walked to the cockpit, climbed into the pilot seat with the ease of muscle memory, and ran the final checklist herself. Her hand hesitated only once, when she reached for the auxiliary switch panel. That's when the tattoo peeked out. It wasn't just a design, it was a symbol, subtle, stylized, inked into the side of her neck like a whisper from the past. A ghostly dagger between 2 rotor blades. Anyone who'd served in Black Ops aviation would recognize it. And that's exactly what happened. Staff Sergeant Booth, a logistics guy with more deployments than he let on, passed by just as Liv slid her headset over her ears. He froze mid-step. His mouth opened slightly. "Ma'am, where did you get that ink?" She glanced down and adjusted the collar. "Just something I picked up." "Why?" Booth didn't say a word. He turned and jogged back into the colonel's office without knocking. Seconds later, Harris stormed out, eyes fixed on Liv like he was seeing her for the first time. He looked at the Apache, at the systems powered on, at the checklist signed electronically with an old but familiar call sign. Ghost Knife 6. "What the hell is this?" Liv stared back, calm. "You needed a pilot. The bird's ready." Harris was about to bark something when Booth leaned in and whispered in his ear. Harris paled. "Is it true?" he asked her, his voice quieter. "You flew under Colonel Draper and Taji?" Liv didn't answer. She didn't need to. "Get in the damn air," Harris barked to the rest of the team. "She's lead on this. Follow her bird." The rotors began to turn. The turbines howled, biting into the desert air with a ferocity that silenced every lingering doubt on the flight line. Liv eased the collective, the Apache's skids lifting clear of the concrete in a single smooth motion that belied the aircraft's bulk. Dust spiraled beneath the fuselage, whipping against hangar walls as her main rotors carved a disciplined circle of hot wind. Two nervous co-pilots in the chase helicopter scrambled to keep up, their chatter bleeding through the commnet in jittery bursts. Altitude checks, torque readouts, half-muttered prayers. Liv spoke only once. "Form on my 6, 2-ship stagger. Radio's silent unless you see muzzle flashes." She pitched forward, nose dipping toward the baked clay flats that stretched to the foothills. The Apache surged, rotor disc tilting, engines settling into that deep, reassuring growl known only to pilots who trust the machine as an extension of muscle and bone. 10 seconds in, she rolled seamlessly through the first navigation waypoint. No hesitation, no recalculation. The cockpit displays glowed green across the board, every system humming as if it had been waiting years for this exact flight. Below, the desert blurred into russet streaks, scattered sagebrush whipping past at 150 knots. Ahead, jagged rock outcrops rose like broken teeth. Somewhere beyond those ridges, a reconnaissance Humvee lay silent, its last transmission cut short mid-sentence. Signals intelligence had pinned 3 hostile pickups on converging vectors. Command wanted eyes on. Liv intended to give them more than that. She planned to bring the convoy home. At 50 feet AGL, she banked left, the Apache knifing between 2 sandstone spires. The chasebird lagged, its pilot wide-eyed, fighting the instinct to climb. Liv's voice crackled. "Stay low, use the terrain." SAM teams don't waste missiles on shadows they can't lock. The pilot behind her steadied, fear seeded to focus. She cleared the final ridge and saw it, thin smoke rising in a shallow valley, the Humvee half concealed beneath a shale overhang. No movement, no voices. The LZ was a kill box, one narrow exit, high ground on both flanks. Perfect for an ambush. Liv throttled back, rotors thumping slow and heavy, nose cannon tracking the eastern ridge. Thermal optics popped to life. Heat signatures glowed, 3, maybe 4 armed silhouettes drifting through scrub, herding toward the disabled vehicle. She keyed the private channel. "Chase 1, orbit high right, cover my egress, I'll sweep." "Copy, Ghost Knife 6. The pilot's tone had shifted, no longer skeptical, now deferential, leaning on the call sign that had surfaced from a file too classified to appear on regular rosters. Liv rolled to port, kicked the tail, and dropped the Apache into the bowl of the valley, rotor wash shredding the smoke column. Enemy fighters scattered, one tripping over a rifle stock, as 30mm shells shredded the ridge behind him. Warning shots, close enough to scorch rock and nerve endings. She swung left, cannon barking short, surgical bursts that collapsed shale ledges and sent 2 combatants sprinting for cover they'd never reach. "Team Havoc, radio check." Her voice cut through the wide band. A raspy reply answered at once, wounded but alive. "Copy, Ghost Knife, 2 KIA, 1 walking wounded, can't move, tires shredded." "Sit tight." She flared, backed the Apache into a hover, wheels a breath above the ground. Side door open, her crew chief jumped, sprinted to the Humvee under the deafening rotor storm. Liv's eyes never left the thermal scope. 2 remaining hostiles scrambled for a technical at the valley's mouth, swinging a machine gun into position. She pivoted the cannon, squeezed, 3 bursts. The engine block erupted, the gunner vanished in a bloom of dust and flame. 30 seconds later, her crew chief's voice cracked in. "Package on board! Pop smoke!" Purple haze blossomed downwind. Liv raised collective, the Apache clawing upward, torque peaking. She slipped between ridges, pivoted onto the escape vector, and punched max power. The chase bird fell in behind her, its cargo bay now host to a bleeding sergeant clutching shattered comm gear. They cleared the mountains in 5 minutes, radio silence broken only by breathless updates from the medic. Behind, a single plume of dark smoke marked the ambush site, enemy transport cooking off under the afternoon sun. Ahead, Fort Rains shimmered like a mirage. Liv throttled back, letting the chase helicopter overtake and land first, medics already sprinting across the pad. She circled once, rolled into final approach, and set the Apache down as soft as a whisper. Engines spooled to idle, dust settled. A crowd gathered, mechanics, flight officers, even grizzled infantrymen who rarely left the barracks. Colonel Harris pushed through them, helmet tucked under one arm, face unreadable. Liv unstrapped, descended the ladder, boots hitting the tarmac with a decisive thud. Harris stopped 2 paces short. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. Then his gaze fixed on her neck, the faint edge of that dagger and rotor tattoo, now streaked with sweat and desert grit. His jaw unclenched. "I flew with a ghost knife once," he said quietly. "Helmand Province, 2009, they saved my platoon." Liv met his eyes. "That pilot taught me everything I know." Harris nodded, a slow, measured motion of respect. Around them, murmurs swelled, rumors cementing into certainty. The mechanic was no mechanic, the quiet woman no longer anonymous. She had flown into a live engagement, extracted a pinned-down unit, and brought everyone home without a single friendly casualty. She had done it in an aircraft on base considered obsolete, and under a call sign thought buried with black ink redactions. Harris drew a breath, voice carrying across the hushed crowd. From this moment, Captain Reynolds is reinstated to flight status and assigned lead on Apache operations. Anyone with objections can take it up with me. His gaze swept the onlookers, none spoke. Liv exhaled, the weight of years easing off her shoulders. She glanced at the Apache, dusty, scarred, still humming with residual heat. She reached up, ran a gloved hand along the fuselage. The machine had given her wings again. She'd given it purpose. Somewhere behind her, turbines roared as another bird taxied. The base returned to motion. But in that narrow pocket of stillness around the landing pad, respect settled like evening dew. The doubters had seen enough, and the silence now carried a different tone, one of acknowledgement, even gratitude. Liv turned toward the hangar, flight helmet under her arm, ready for debrief, ready for whatever mission followed. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. The sky was open again, and everyone on base understood one simple truth. Skill doesn't fade, and legends never stay grounded for long. It started with one question, the kind you ask without thinking. "Ma'am," Corporal Diaz said, jogging up as Liv was halfway back to her hangar, "how did you know the vibration frequency just from hearing it?" Liv turned slowly. Her green eyes locked onto him for a second, like she was calculating something. "It's not just hearing," she said. "It's familiar." Diaz laughed lightly. "You sure you weren't military once?" She didn't laugh back, didn't say anything. Just tapped the wrench in her hand twice against her thigh. Back inside the hangar, Liv closed the rolling door, alone again. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but memory. She reached for her toolkit, but her eyes drifted to the locker in the far corner, the one with the reinforced lock, the one she hadn't opened in nearly 8 years. Outside, things were escalating. The colonel had finally arrived, tall, broad-shouldered, an old-school pilot who valued ranks and reputations more than intuition. He stepped onto the tarmac with a scowl carved into his face, barking questions at Diaz and the others about what had just happened. "Someone said the mechanic overrode the diagnostics," he barked. "She didn't override, sir," Diaz said. "She corrected it. Saved the bird, actually." The colonel didn't like that answer. He marched straight to the hangar, pushing open the door. "Liv!" She was waiting, calm, straight-backed. Something was different in her stance. Less civilian, more something else. "Sir," she said flatly, "I heard you disarmed the lockout. Who authorized—" "I did." "You don't have that authority." Liv paused, then walked forward. She stopped just short of him and said something low, calm, and controlled. Your checklist would have cooked the turbine. Ask your tech chief if you don't believe me. The colonel looked stunned. Excuse me? I wrote that checklist 12 years ago. He stared. What? Liv stepped to the side and picked up a sealed folder. It was worn, corners folded, but the cover still bore the faded insignia of a classified ops division no longer active. She handed it to him. Inside, her original D-214, honorable discharge, pilot designation, cleared for black zone operations, and a second document, a redacted record from a CIA contractor program. The colonel's mouth opened slightly as he scanned the page. You're Ghost Pilot K-93. She nodded once. That's not possible. K-93 vanished in 2017. Liv lifted the edge of her shirt collar. A small tattoo sat just below the curve of her neck. A stylized raven, wings folded, a line of binary beneath it. The colonel stepped back. Outside the hangar, a few technicians had started to gather. Word was spreading, fast. Diaz was the first to step in. Sir, we looked her up. Her name's not in any public military database. Of course not, the colonel muttered. She wasn't supposed to exist. He turned back to Liv. Why are you here? Liv exhaled slowly. Because someone has to keep these birds flying, and I thought I could do it quietly. The colonel shook his head. After what you did in Kandahar, in Seoul, you just walked away? I didn't walk. I was shut down, wiped from the record. A long silence followed. Then, the sound of distant rotors, fast, urgent. An Apache gunship in a training op had just taken an unexpected hit. Partial fire in the tail. Mayday was coming in over the radio. They needed emergency landing clearance. Every available pilot was either in simulation or grounded. No one was in the air. The only Apache not stripped for parts was the one Liv had personally rebuilt. She looked at the colonel. Let me fly it. He hesitated. You're not cleared. She stepped forward. Neither is that bird, but I'm the only one who knows how she breathes. The colonel stared at her for a beat, then handed her the helmet. The hangar doors opened again, and for the first time in nearly a decade, Ghost Pilot K-93 walked toward an Apache she had practically rebuilt from memory, while the base watched in silence. The next moment would change everything. The desert air burned hot as the engines of the Apache idled low behind her, the rotors slicing the silence like a heartbeat refusing to stop. Captain Jensen stood frozen near the hangar, his mouth slightly open, his radio still in hand but now utterly forgotten. What had just happened defied every regulation, every protocol, every assumption he had ever made about the quiet mechanic named Eden Vale. She stepped down from the cockpit slowly, not arrogantly, not with swagger, just purpose, like she'd done this walk 100 times before, like she belonged there. Around her, the world shifted. The other pilots, Lieutenant Morris, Jenkins, Tran, men who had rolled their eyes just 20 minutes earlier when she'd warned of the mechanical fault, were now watching her as if seeing her for the first time. None of them spoke. No one dared to break the strange silence that hung in the air like static. The Apache's skid hit the concrete with a final thud as it powered down, and that was the cue. Colonel Hargrave, who had been observing from the control tower, came striding out across the tarmac with the kind of precision that said he wasn't here to ask questions. 2 MPs trailed him, but it was clear they weren't there to detain her. Hargrave walked straight up to Eden. He stopped short, not out of hesitation, but respect. And then, without a word, he tilted his head slightly and addressed her, not like a subordinate, not even like a fellow officer, but like a peer. You could have let him crash, he said, voice low. You could have let them ignore you. Eden didn't respond immediately. She looked past him at the stunned crew gathered behind. I don't do this for them, she said quietly. I do it for the ones who need me to do it. That pilot, he would have died out there. I wasn't going to watch it happen again. Again? The colonel asked. Her hand rose slowly to brush back her hair. For a second, her neck was exposed, and the unmistakable ink of the ghosts of Anaconda emerged from beneath the grease-stained collar. A unit long believed to have been disbanded, classified, buried. Eden didn't flinch when the colonel saw it. He blinked, just once, then took a step back. You flew with the 109th, he muttered. They said the whole unit was lost, she finished. They were, except me. Behind them, someone whispered, "Ghost of Anaconda." That's when everything changed. The atmosphere cracked, like pressure being released after a sealed chamber had finally been breached. The silence collapsed into murmurs, some of awe, some of apology, others of disbelief. Captain Jensen looked like he'd just been court-martialed without trial, his face drained of blood, his posture rigid, his pride shattered. "Is it true?" someone asked. "You took down a convoy in Kabul with no radar, no escort?" Eden didn't answer. She didn't need to. The colonel raised a hand to quiet the crowd. "Captain Jensen," he barked. The man stiffened. "Effective immediately. You're relieved of command pending review." The reaction was instant. Not a sound. Not a protest. The ground crew dispersed with silent respect, like a tide receding after a storm. Eden turned to walk back toward the hangar, but Hargrave wasn't done. "Vale," he called. She paused. He hesitated, then said it. "We need pilots. Real ones. The kind that don't crack under pressure. You're wasted under a wrench." She looked at him, eyes fierce. "I don't fly for glory, sir." "You don't have to," he replied. "Just fly. They need you." Eden turned back toward the hangar. She didn't answer, but she didn't say no either. Weeks later, the base had returned to its rhythm. But something in its heartbeat had changed. A new name echoed in the hangars, passed between recruits like a myth made real. The name wasn't Eden Vale, it was Echo. That was the call sign the Pentagon had reinstated. A name that once appeared in buried after-action reports, in redacted footnotes and whispered acknowledgments from men who owed their lives to someone nobody could ever name. She had been erased. Now she was legend. She didn't ask for a ceremony. She didn't wear the new wings they gave her. She barely even showed up at the morning briefings, unless she had something to say. But no one questioned her anymore, because when she did speak, everyone listened. The tattoo on her neck, once hidden beneath grease and hair, was now always visible. She no longer covered it up, not because she needed to prove anything, but because she no longer had to hide. That was the difference. She hadn't changed. They had. One morning, a group of fresh pilots was gathered outside the simulator building. They were loud, cocky, full of stories they hadn't earned. One of them, a young lieutenant named Corwin, turned to Eden as she passed by with her clipboard and grease-streaked sleeves. He didn't recognize her. "You here to clean the vents, ma'am?" He smirked. She stopped just for a second, looked at him. No sarcasm, no anger. Just that steady, unblinking calm she'd always had. Then she said 4 words. "See you in airspace." By the time Corwin entered the simulator 20 minutes later, his laughter had faded. And when he saw the name Echo 1 pop up on the combat roster beside his, he didn't speak again for the entire session. Because in the simulation, he never made it past Phase 2. Eden did the impossible, again. A kill ratio never seen before. Maneuvers that shouldn't have been possible in confined airspace. A perfect extraction under live-fire simulation. And she did it with one engine compromised. Again. Outside, as he exited the building, pale and quiet, Eden passed by once more, tossing a rag over her shoulder. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. But the old colonel was there, leaning against the railing, coffee in hand. "Next time you see a mechanic," he said quietly to Corwin, "look at their hands. Scars like that don't come from fixing helicopters. They come from saving lives." That evening, Eden walked out onto the tarmac just as the sun dipped below the horizon. Her Apache stood still under the golden light, blades silent, cockpit closed. She didn't climb in. She just stood there, a silhouette against a dying sky, watching, remembering, breathing. And then, from the shadows of the hangar, a second figure approached, a civilian, mid-30s, quiet, carried no insignia. But Eden tensed instantly. He smiled faintly. "Didn't think I'd find you here." She didn't turn. "Took you long enough. Wasn't sure you were real, until I saw the report." She exhaled slowly. "I thought you died in Kandahar." He stepped forward. "I almost did. You got me out." Now she turned, just slightly, enough to meet his eyes. Hers shimmered in the twilight. "You saved me," he added. "Now I work for the ones who almost forgot you. I made sure they won't forget again." She looked away toward the distant line of jets parked under floodlights. "You still fly, Eden?" "Only when I have to," she said. Then, after a pause, "Which is always." He didn't ask anything more, just nodded and walked away. And Eden remained, alone, on that strip of burning concrete, under the slow blink of the tower beacon, not because she had something to prove, but because someone might need her. And when they did, she would be ready. If this story gave you chills, or reminded you never to judge someone by their uniform, share it with someone who needs to hear it. At The Human Stories, we believe real courage often hides in silence. Tap that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join our growing community of people who still believe in honor, respect, and second chances. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.